Evolution by natural selection. Here we have Charles Darwin on the origin of species by means of natural selection. So he launched this in relation to his voyage via ship HMS Beagle dated February 12, 1831. And the destination is of course voyage around the world, but he focused for about 5 weeks in Galapagos Island here. So the purpose is for him to find evidence to propose a revolutionary hypothesis about how life changes over time. On the Galapagos Island, Darwin was able to find about different varieties of finches. Then for tortoise as well, Darwin observed that the characteristics of many animals and plants varied noticeably among the different Galapagos Islands. Then, among the tortoises, the shape of the shell corresponds to different habitats. For example, the Hood Island glass, it corresponds to the tortoise on the right that has a long neck and a shell that is curved and open around the neck and legs, allowing the tortoise to reach the space of the vegetation island. The tortoise from Isabel Island on the lower left has a dome-shaped shell and a shorter neck, as you can see. Then the vegetation on this part is abundant and closer to the ground. So the tortoise then from the Pinta Island has a shell that is immediate between or intermediate between these two forms. That is his observation. With this, he came up with questions like why had so many of these species disappeared? Why they can be found on other islands? How were they related to living species? So those are the questions that was engraved in Darwin's mind. And next, I will be discussing the ideas that shape Darwin's thinking that led to the natural selection. These are the following persons. We have here James Hutton, Charles Lyell, wherein Darwin thought if Earth changed over time, what about life? Then we have here the population growth by Thomas Malthus, in which as population grow, wherein more babies born than die, there will be a competition like competition for living space, there will be an insufficient living space, and then food runs out. So Darwin applied this theory to animals. And then Lamarck's theory of evolution, the tendency toward perfection, use and disuse, and then the inherited of acquired traits. Lamarck's giraffe and Darwin's giraffe. So for Lamarck's giraffe, we have here a variation or a giraffe with short necks. And they are in an environment wherein there are tall trees and they cannot reach that out. So these parent giraffes will try to stretch out their necks upward to the tall trees, right? And they will reproduce, they will fertilize. So they will lay an offspring, which according to Lamarck's will have a longer neck compared to the parents. Okay, and so on until they were able to reach the tall trees already. So that was according to Lamarck's. But according to Darwin's giraffe, all the giraffes have different variation of the necks, different lengths. There are shorter giraffes. So for example, they came from parents. There are variations of giraffe from the offspring or descent with modification, as we call it, that have longer necks. Okay, there are shorter necks, and then there are giraffes caused by mutation to produce or to have a longer necks. And then the shorter necks, they cannot get the leaves, which is their food from the tall trees. So what will happen is that the tall giraffes here, or the giraffes having a longer necks, they will be able to reach the tall trees. And so these giraffes here will be able to reproduce. Okay. The chances are there will be a higher chance that they will be able to pass their traits on their offspring, producing a longer neck as well of offspring. And then what will happen to the shorter necks? Since they cannot reach out for the food, of course they will starve and then they will die and then so they will extinct since they cannot reproduce, since they don't have the energy, let us say like that. Another person that shaped Darwin's mind of thinking is Alfred Russel Wallace. They independently conceived the theory of evolution through natural selection. They have the idea, okay, great minds think alike, as they say it. Then the first paper on the subject was jointly published with some of Darwin's writing in 1858. This prompted Darwin also to publish his writings. All right. To better understand this one, let us start with the idea of descent, or the idea that all organisms emerge from a common descent. How did this took place when random descent class, the random descent with modification could never do a such thing. So Darwin drew upon his knowledge of selective breeding or artificial selection to answer this question. So for example here, what can you observe here? They have skulls, right? They are skulls and their features are closer or similar to each other, right? Yes. So this one is the idea of common descent. We derive from common ancestors. Then the idea of theory of evolution is of common descent, wherein the organisms evolved from a common ancestor. So Charles Darwin used the analogy of artificial selection to better understand the theory of evolution or natural selection. For thousands of years, farmers have been taking wild animals and plants and through the process of selective breeding have sculpted the original wild forms into new domestic forms, which are much better suited for human consumption and use. So for example, the wild pigs, so they domesticated that into pigs that can be consumed or better suited for human consumption. So the process is slow, but it is simple. You just have to stop the reproduction of other unwanted species or unwanted variety of the species. So like this here, this video. So like this video here, if a single plant produces 100 seeds, most will grow to be nearly identical to the parent plant class. What will happen? A few, however, will be slightly different. Some variations are undesirable, like smaller size, bitter taste, vulnerability to disease, and so on. Other variations are, of course, valuable. For example, thicker and sweeter leaves. And then, if a farmer only allows the best plant to reproduce and create seeds for the next crops, small positive changes will add up over multiple generations, eventually producing dramatically superior vegetable. Just the evolution of this original plant into all the varieties we see today was carefully guided by different farmers around the world. It's important to note, class, that the farmer doesn't actually create anything random. They do not create this trait. The random descent with modification creates new traits by mutation, let us say, or alteration in the genes. The farmer simply chooses which of those variations are allowed to reproduce and which are not. So, from this analogy or idea, Darwin proposed that nature itself is capable of selection, and this led to the evolution by natural selection. So, there are 6 principles underlying the natural selection. Let us discuss this one by one. First, we have here the species overproduction. Let us say I have here a single stalk of fern, and underneath the leaves of the fern, there are seeds from their spores, which they will scatter on the wind, and it will be producing more ferns compared to the single parent. So there will be a overproduction of the species. Another example is we have here the frog. The frog here lays about hundreds, thousands of eggs. Though that is what we call the overproduction. From a single parent, it produces hundreds of thousands of eggs in the nature. So this will lead to variation in the species. When we say variation, let us say butterflies, there are yellow butterflies and then there are brown butterflies, right? White rabbit, black rabbit, like for that example. And then from those variation and overproduction, there will be a competition because, like I said, there is an overproduction. So the offspring or other species will tend to compete for space, for food, for survival. Then adaptation. Individuals with beneficial adaptations are more likely to survive to pass on their genes. So for example, I have here 2 birds. We have here caterpillars, the brown caterpillars, and then the light-colored caterpillars, and the environment in which these caterpillars thrive is in a bark, the brown-colored bark, wherein it is most suitable. Chances are there is a higher chance of survival for the brown caterpillar because they blend with the environment, which is the brown bark. They blend here, so they are safer from the predators. Unlike on this, the light-colored caterpillar, they are can be easily targeted by the predators. So their population tend to decrease significantly, and they cannot pass their traits in higher frequency. Unlike here, the brown caterpillars, they have the higher chance of passing their traits, which is suitable, the brown color, suitable for the environment, and it will increase their frequency as well. So for adaptation, we have here the term the survival of the fittest. For our nature, it is not always the biggest, the strongest, or the fastest who will survive, but those species that have a adaptation qualities or adaptive qualities that is most suited to their environment. So for example, here we have the frog, and then we have here the beetles or bugs. So the frog will eat the colored beetles or bugs because they can easily spot it compared to the green ones because the green ones blend on their environment. So meaning to say, although we have earlier the larger beetles, being large is not enough for you to survive. You must blend or adaptive to your environment. On this case, the camouflage is the adaptive quality of these beetles. Another example I have here a population of mice that has moved into a new area where the rocks are very dark. Due to natural genetic variation, some mice are black or dark colored, while some are tan or light colored. And then their environment is dark. And then we have the predators, like let us say a hawk or an eagle. So the eagle can easily spot the tan colored since it is light colored. While as you can see on the earlier times on this picture, the tan-colored mice has a larger population or greater population compared to darker ones. But since they cannot blend with their environment, they can be easily targeted by predators, thus therefore decreasing their population. And as you can see, the mice here have a greater chance of passing their traits because they are not prone to threats, not that exposed to threats. Okay, they have adaptive qualities, so they have the higher chance of passing to reproduction their traits. So later on, for next generations, there will be a higher population of the dark colored ones because they are the ones who can reproduce and is suitable for the environment. While the tan colored mice here, they became significantly less. Another example, classic example, is the peppered moth. I have here the black peppered moth and then the white peppered moth here. This one happens around 1800s, wherein there is an industrial revolution and the suits of the factories covered or tainted the birch trees or the trees. Therefore, if you have light peppered moth here and then dark colored peppered moth, and then you have the birds as predators, they can easily spot the light colored ones because they cannot blend with their environment, so their population will decrease. While the peppered moth here, the black ones, they can easily reproduce because there is a less threat, okay, because of their adaptive qualities, therefore increasing their population. So that is how the traits, some traits are becoming extinct, or some traits are, or species are becoming extinct because they cannot pass their traits or offspring. They cannot have their offspring because of the threats around the nature they are in or their environment. Then next is the selection. I have here, over many generations, there is a change in allele frequency or trait frequency, which is the evolution. So we have here an environment of brown bark, and then we have two species here, two variations of butterfly rather. We have the yellow ones and the brown ones. Of course, if you have an insect-eating birds or let us say a frog, they can easily spot the yellow ones. So therefore, the brown ones have the higher chance of reproducing and passing their traits, which is suited for the survival in their environment. Okay, there will be an increase of their traits, and then the yellow ones will be, let us say, decrease in population. All right. The nature selects, the environment itself selects what traits will be passed on to the next generation or what will, let us say, evolve. Next, we have here the speciation. Allopathic speciation, these are a physical barrier separates one population into two or more. Then sympatric speciation, a species evolves into a new species without a physical barrier. For example, I have here Albert squirrel and Kaibab squirrel, separated by a Grand Canyon. They are both squirrels. And what type of speciation is this one? Since there is a barrier, then this one is allopatric, meaning to say it produces two species because of the barrier. Another example, we have here the ancestor finch, found this one in the Galapagos Island, but by natural selection, since there are barriers in the islands, the islands are separated. This ancestor finch produced or evolved into different kinds of variation. Another example I have here, one species of apple flies only feeds one kind of apple, while the other flies feeds on other apple. However, they live side by side. Is this sympatric or allopatric? Again, there is no physical barrier between these flies. So, of course, this is a sympatric speciation. Another example we have here, this one is the original population and then initial step of speciation. Then there will be an evolution of the reproductive isolation. Then there will be a production of two new species or speciation, just like this one from the salamander, who lives on a, let us say, similar pond, and they evolve into different variety of that species. Next, we have here gradualism. Remember class, that evolutionary changes happen in very small steps over millions of years, not spontaneous. It talks about millions, thousands of years. Scientists call this idea as a theory of gradualism. All right, let us proceed now on the elaborate part of this lesson. For evidences of evolution, we encountered a fossil record of whale evolution. So let me zoom in this one. We have here the Pachycetus terrestrial. This is the ancestral. This one is terrestrial. So the whale mammal evolved from a terrestrial one. All right. The legs here are evident. And then later on, a variety of these mutate into the cetus, which is predominantly aquatic. As you can see here, the limbs seem like a swimming one. Then it evolved into the rodon, wherein the pelvis and hind limb are almost hidden. This one is fully aquatic. And then we have here the pelvis and the hind limb here, this one. This one is balaena. This one is the recent whale ancestor. Now let us focus on their heads, the fossil heads. We have here the nostrils, and then this one is Archaeocetus. The nostrils at the middle, the nostrils at the Enya geofrancis Amazonian dolphin. But if you will enlarge this one, they have two nostrils here on this part, but the blownose of blownose of the whales is only one at the top. All right, it evolved in the upper head. The blownose of the whales are in the upper head. So this is the humpback whale skeleton. We still have the limbs here, the pelvic limbs, and then we still have the blownose here, which is this one. Other evidence for evolution is the comparative anatomy. For comparative anatomy, this one is a study of similarities and differences in the structures of different species. On this simulation, you will be encountering types of structures like homologous, analogous, and vestigial structures. Let us simulate on the part of homologous structures as you see on the simulation. So I have here the arms of human, cat, whale, and bat. When we say homologous structures, these are body parts of organisms that may or that perform different functions but are of the same origin. This one is an evidence of common ancestry. Okay. So as you can see here, then the human, the cat, the whale, and the bat, we have here the humerus, this one, the blue ones. Then we have the radius, the orange ones. Then the ulna, the light white. Then we have here the carpal, the yellow ones. The metacarpals, the green ones. Then the phalanges, here the blue ones. This homologous structure is related or in connection with divergent evolution, in which the common ancestor adapt different traits. So, for example, the common ancestor of the dog species are the wolf, the chihuahua, for example. All right, Aska, they descended from the wolf. Another example, we have here the zebras, donkeys, and horses that is related to Philompus here. All right, and then another type of structure for comparative anatomy is the analogous structure. When we say analogous structure, these are body parts of organisms that may perform the same functions but are of different origins. For example, here I have like the sharkfish. It has a fin. Penguin, the bird, it has a wing. And dolphin, the mammal, which has a flipper. Analogous structures are similar structures in organisms without shared ancestry. These structures evolved independently to serve the same purpose. For flying, for example, we have here from the class of the birds, the wings, class insecta, and then class mammalia, the bat. So that is what we mean by analogous structure. They evolve, they have the same function, but they evolve from different classes. So analogous structure is related to convergent evolution. For example, when we say convergent evolution, this is the wherein two or more different species evolved with similar traits, although they came from different classes. So for example, I have here the whale and the bat. Okay, they both developed the echolation to find food. Then let us proceed with vestigial structures. On your simulation, you may follow me here. So if I have here for the whale, considered the pelvis of the whale is considered to be vestigial since they cannot use that in the swimming. But for humans, this pelvis here is important for us for supporting in walking and sitting erect, all right, or other mammals such as lion or tigers. But for whales, these are considered as vestigial structures or useless part of the body. When we say vestigial structures anyway, these are body parts that are useless or left over from a previous ancestor in which they were useful, okay, previously useful. So since, as I have mentioned earlier, for the fossil record, the ancestor of the whales have, originally they have pelvis, they have limbs, okay, so this one is a remnant of the ancestor whale. All right. Next, we have here the ostrich wings. It's considered to be a vestigial structure since they cannot use them to fly. Another example, we have here the vestigial structure of the cave fish and the surface fish. We have the eyes for cave fish since the cave fish cannot use that to see. So that is considered to be a vestigial structure. And then for humans, we have our appendix. For us, it is not useful, but for other animals, this one is useful since according to this, it produces as well an enzyme that for other animals, right? So to aid their digestion of the raw meat they are eating. So this is useful for carnivores. Another example of vestigial structure in humans is the wisdom tooth. So wisdom tooth here is an extra set of teeth. Okay, but we do not need this one since we do not eat a raw meat. According to analysis, this wisdom tooth here is very essential for carnivorous animal like lions, tigers, since they eat raw meat and they need that added set of teeth. But for us, this will become a troublesome. So that's why some people tend to remove this wisdom tooth since the growth of this one is painful. Another vestigial structure for human is the muscle here on the external part of the ear. We do not need this one because we can easily rotate our head to locate the direction of the sound. But for some animals that cannot detect the source of the sound immediately, they need this extra muscle to propagate the sound on their ears for the direction of the sound. Then we have here the tailbone for the humans. This one is vestigial structure. Since this one is a remnant of our ancestor, we do not use our tail for climbing trees. We walk erect, right? So we do not use the tail. But for other animals, the tailbone is useful for climbing trees, like chimpanzees, monkeys, apes. Then we have here another evidence, which is the embryonic development. I have here the early embryo, mid-stage embryo, and mature embryo or fetus of fish, salamander, tortoise, chicken, and human. So as you can see in the early embryo, they all have the gill slits, even the human as well. But so on, it evolves into another type. All of them have tails. And then the human develop a forelimb band or hindlimb band, which is similar to whales. But then it evolved into legs. But while some evolved into continuously into tails, some evolved into shorter feet or clawed feet, webbed feet rather. So this one denotes a common ancestor which can be observed during their embryonic development. And then another evidence of evolution is the genetic information. under amino acid differences between hemoglobin. So I have here the human, macaque, dog, bird, frog. So as you can see, we are closely related here for the macaque or the apes, which are the ape chimpanzees. And this one, the sequences. Then this is the comparison of the human chromosomes and chimpanzee chromosomes, since according to DNA analysis, we are compatible of 98.8% with chimpanzees, and there is just a slight difference here in the second chromosome, where there is an extra chromosome that differentiate or distinguish as the remaining accounting 1.2%, which makes us different from chimpanzee. And then I have here a sequence of amino acids in the same part of the hemoglobin molecules. I have here the human, chimpanzee. As you can see, they have the same sequence. Lysine, glutamine, histidine, and isoleucine. They have the same sequence. This is for amino acids for hemoglobin molecules. I'd like to end this demo with a quote by Charles Darwin that it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. So that's all for this demo lecture. Thank you so much.